Hi, I'm Nina and welcome to NV Fine Art Studio. Oh, wet on wet. Tell me who didn't struggle at least once with wet on wet. I definitely did, and more than once. So, to simplify your journey and relieve you from these struggles, I want to share my tricks. Hope they will help you as well. So, let's start. The palette with angled wells. The main difference here is it has angled containers, and they allow you to control water to paint ratio. When you use this palette, you mostly have to pay attention to how fast the mix runs down the palette. This is my typical first wash consistency, the lightest value. It runs down the slope almost instantly. It is commonly called a tea consistency due to its very thin and transparent nature. This is my typical second wash consistency, middle value wash. It is slightly slower on the way down in comparison to the previous wash. It is usually called milk consistency due to its similarity to milk viscosity. The last one is for the darkest darks or dry brush technique. It almost has no water in it and sticks to the surface pretty well. Here are these three washes next to each other for you to compare. The key point to take from all this talking is if the mix doesn't run down on the palette, it means it will stay put on your wet on wet work and will not create unwanted blooms. This palette is good for beginners who are still learning about the relationship between thickness of the paint and wetness of the paper surface. Dear friends, I have an announcement to make. I have launched my Patreon page. I'm focusing on two main aspects: being creative and improving your skills. So, the first tier is called Creative Watercolor. We will imagine, experiment and have fun there. I will be posting a full-time lessons for this tier every second week. If in addition to being creative you wish to work on improving your skills, then the second tier masterclass community is the way to go. The biggest difference from the first one is it offers access to two libraries, Creative and Masterclass, and access to Community Forum, where you will be able to post your attempts and questions and receive instructions from me on where and how to improve. I also have an Art Collector tier for patrons who, in addition to learning, wish to receive one of my paintings. It will be a large piece of art over quarter watercolor sheet, and it will be one of the recent works. I will post it to you at my expense no matter where you are after 12 months of support. Thank you, friends, and I hope to see you there. My second trick is to add white watercolor instead of water. If you don't mind opaque watercolors and worry about ruining the wash, this would be definitely a good trick in your arsenal. Let me explain you how it works. Here's a damp surface. Let's imagine it's a sky and we want to paint clouds. Clouds usually not too dark in value, so if I mix light value wash, tea consistency, there is a chance it will create blooms. So, if I was at the beginning of my watercolor learning journey, my first thought would be to add a bit more pigment to make it thicker and get rid of the blooms. But this will not only get the mix thicker, it will also get it darker in value. So, let's have a look at what white pigment does to the mix. It keeps the mix thick and light. It also gives the mix a hazy appearance. It goes hand in hand with the purpose of wet on wet technique, the hazy edges. This all is particularly relevant for distant objects and creating atmosphere. In other words, white pigment works as a filler. It makes it thicker but doesn't increase the value. So the mixture will not bloom when you paint over the damp surface. My third trick is use a rag or sponge to eliminate an excess of water. This will help with controlling the wetness of your mix. I have two examples for you. First example is changing pigment but keeping same value. When you need to change your pigment, rinse your brush in the water, tap it on the rag or sponge, then pick up the pigment and continue to paint. If you rinse your brush and get straight into the mix, you will dilute it and it will bloom. Second example is changing value if you need to increase it. Rinse the brush, wipe it on a rug, pick up paint, add it to the mix and continue painting. Trick number 4 is to use spray bottle. The safest surface for painting is when it's very wet. This is the time when you can use any consistency paint and any value. But the problem is that this stage passes very quickly. So if you use spray bottle, we will extend the lifetime of wet surface. But there is a few things to remember. Start spraying when the paper is wet and keep spraying regularly. Do not wait until the paper is close to drying out. It will create all sorts of unwanted effects. Do it gently with the moving motion. It will help you to evenly cover the surface with the mist rather than with a shower of water in one spot. Do not spray too close to the surface. Coming too close will create a little burst that may destroy your wash. Size of the bottle. It is the same principle as with the brushes. The larger the surface, the bigger the bottle. It is easier to have an even coverage with a larger spraying circle. For a quarter sheet, I usually use this size. For a full sheet, I would use this bottle. My last trick is to use same paper. Different paper has different properties of absorbing the water. It means that the time it stays wet differs. So if you use the same paper, it will be easier for you to predict the outcome. For example, 3 different paper qualities here. 100% cotton 300 GSM from our local art store, 100% cotton 300 GSM from Amazon, and 50% cotton 300 GSM from local store. I'm going to paint a light wash first and leave it for 3 minutes. Now I'm going to add a shadow. It is a slightly thicker mix. The first sample is still pretty damp, the second just barely damp, and the third one is very patchy. Let's see how the second wash will look like. Sample 1 is spreading nicely, second is quite patchy. Some edges are hard and some soft, and the spread is very uneven. The third one is a disaster in my opinion. I'm still able to work on the first one because it's still damp, having difficulties to work on the second, as the second layer leaves very unattractive hard edges. When I continue working on the third, it actually leaves the previous pigment in some areas. Here's this test a few minutes later, after the second layer had a chance to work with the first one. In my opinion, sample number 1 is the only acceptable result. So, I'd suggest using the same brand, same thickness and same roughness of the paper until you start getting the feeling you understand how wet on wet works. As soon as you start trusting your intuition, then you can experiment with different papers. Please let me know if you try them out and if it makes your watercolor painting easier. If you have your own tips on tackling wet on wet, please share them in the comments below. Hope that was informative, so please like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.